As an honorary institution, the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign has a responsibility to acknowledge the historical context in which it exists. In order to remind ourselves in our community, we will begin this event with Owings Merrill, where early link to the Peoria, Cascade, Yakasha, Wea, Miami, Asuden, Odawa, Swaki, Kickapoo, Ottawa, Ojibwe, and Chickasaw nations. It is necessary for us to acknowledge these native nations for us to work with them as we move forward as an institution. Over the next 150 years, we will be a vibrant community inclusive of all our differences and committed people that support our efforts.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Joseph Altruller. I'm an assistant professor here at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign School of Architecture and chair of the Lecture and Exhibition Committee. It's my pleasure to welcome you here tonight. Tonight's lecture is made possible by the Alden Orput Endowment. Our curated series this semester is entitled Advocates Advocate. Architectural training empowers us to do so much more than design buildings. In what ways might architectural advocates advocate with and for communities that we work with? How can architects, designers, planners advance public policy and the vitality of the public realm? What does civically engaged design look like in 2023? And in what new ways might designers impact contemporary public spaces? To what extent can architectural thinking and practice expand our collective capacities for empathy and justice? This series invites varied voices to respond to the role of design advocacy in their work and to reflect on their role in engaging with the publicness and civicness of the built environment. And so tonight, we welcome a super advocate to the stage of Plim Auditorium, Tiara Hughes. A St. Louis native, now based in Chicago, Tiara is a senior urban designer at Skidmore, Owings Merrill, a commissioner with the City of Chicago Landmarks Committee, and a founder of First 500, a global platform dedicated to elevating and celebrating Black women architects. Tiara is a devoted activist, educator, advocate for underrepresented communities and voices, and recently serves on the board of the National Organization of Minority Architects, and currently the Charnley-Persky House Board of Directors for the Society of Architectural Historians. Tiara's personal experience in the industry, along with her passion for advocacy, led her to establish First 500 in 2018. As the founder and executive director of First 500, Tiara raises awareness of the importance of Black women architects throughout history and their contribution to the built environment. As a designer, Tiara creates work that emphasizes greater socioeconomic equity and cultural awareness. She believes, quote, ultimately, our efforts to positively impact communities of color will expand outward and evolve our academic institutions, our firms, our industry, and by extension, our communities. In 2021, Tiara received the prestigious National AIA Associates Award, and in 2022, she received Landmark Illinois' Influencer Award for her progressive and inclusive efforts to preserve the built environment and equitably advance the design industry. She has also been recognized as a distinguished alumni by her alma mater, Drury University, and most recently, she received the Making Waves Award from the esteemed Chicago Women in Architecture organization. Tonight's lecture, the Q&A, will be moderated by Ariana Eason. Ariana is a fourth-year student in our Bachelor of Science in Architectural Studies program, and she currently serves as the president of the Illinois School of Architecture's chapter of NOMAS. Ariana is particularly interested in pursuing architecture as a tool for urban design and providing unique design solutions to problems rooted in a history of discrimination, especially of Black and brown communities. I also want to mention, particularly to our students, if anyone is interested in joining a special NOMAS breakfast tomorrow morning with Ariana, please join them at 9:30 a.m. in Temple Buell Hall, room 104, for a special breakfast for students and Tiara. We hope to see you there as well. We'll certainly hear more from Ariana soon, but first, please join me in welcoming Tiara Hughes to Plym Auditorium.
Thank you so much. Can you guys hear me? Great, perfect. I always start with this slide because it's nice to just set the stage. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for having me today. Now, I first like to take us, in order to understand advocacy, and by the way, I love this topic, I love this conversation, I love just the thoughts, and I think it is a really important topic, not just in schools, but in industry right now, of advocacy. You know, as architects, as urban designers, how can we use our voice beyond the designs that we introduce to communities? And so this is probably going to be a very unconventional lecture for you because I am focusing more on what does advocacy look like outside of practice and in addition to practice, as opposed to how does our practice perform advocacy. So first, in order to understand how advocacy and activism ever introduced itself to me, we have to go back. We have to go back in time. This is my elementary school, Shepherd Accelerated School in St. Louis. And it's a beautiful school. It's closed, it's condemned, it's no longer with us. But this school housed so many memories and really was the profound foundation into how I think and where I come from and how I figured out I want to be an architect. And so here at Shepherd, in the 3rd grade, I was a part of the gifted arts program, and in this program, they had us do any medium of art of our choice, and I decided to draw buildings. And I think I was inspired by the books and the magazines and what I saw, because that didn't reflect the environment that I grew up in, and I felt like I had to be a person that creates those spaces and creates that feeling of community for places where I live. And so in 3rd grade, a woman told me, you want to be an architect. And I hung on to that ever since. So this is Drury's campus, by the way, for those of us who are not familiar. It was tough. Look, I don't envy the seats that you sit in right now, speaking to the students. Architecture school is a tough piece. And for me, Drury was no exception. I think I definitely learned advocacy. I learned not to give up. I learned resilience in this space. But one of the takeaways from my education was the fact that I never met a Black woman architect. I also never saw Black architects work in our textbooks. I never was introduced to a Black architect, and that stuck with me, and that ultimately was the impetus behind why I moved to our great city, Chicago. So upon graduation, I ran. I mean, if I could, I would have ran across the map to Chicago. And I think the reasoning was I absolutely wanted to connect with more people in practice of color, and specifically Black women architects. That was the reason, and that was why I ended up in Chicago. But that was also a challenge. Black women, Black architects were not easy to come by. And so I had to understand, where would it all start for me? And for me, it started with building capacity. So moving to Chicago, I ended up with a firm, HOK, I'm sure you guys are familiar. If not, it's another large firm that does large projects. But I started with HOK and worked on projects like this. And I said, this is a great experience, but it's not really touching where I want to work, which is, again, in communities similar to that I grew up in, similar to where Shepherd Elementary School is located. So then I went to a smaller firm where I can wear more hats and kind of work in spaces like this. So it's getting there. You know, we're getting more into, this is Malcolm X Community College, by the way, in Chicago. And then this is the, you guys recognize that building? It's on your campus. If you don't. So this is a part of a veterinarian school. And so I actually did get to work on that project and work on these drawings for that. So we're getting closer, but we're still not quite there yet. And so that is when I said, you know what, let's stop focusing so much on the work and let's pick my head up and look around. And that is when I was introduced to NOMA. And my life changed, I think, in the industry. Changed forever. I was able to meet people of color. I was able to connect with those who've had similar lived experiences. NOMA is our local chapter, and I was able to kind of dig in and become a leader in that space. So I'm so excited that NOMA, to connect with you guys tomorrow and talk a little bit more about that. But NOMA really set the stage for me. And you cannot tell that photo at the top. Man, I wish there was like a logo or something, but that's here in your building as well. That's here in one of the spaces here. I was on a panel for you guys for the NOMA Symposium. And so moving along, the spaces that in which I work evolved as well. I stepped back and I said, you know what? The details of how a building comes together isn't necessarily from me, and I stepped into the space of urban design, which was really the pivotal point for me in my career. This is when I got to work more with communities. I got to see things more from a visionary standpoint rather than, again, the kind of day-to-day intricacies of how a building comes together. That's important too. Don't take that as a jab. But for me, it was really about how do I roll my sleeves up and work with communities. And so my most, I guess, recent and impactful project that has gotten me back into that space, the original space I've been seeking my whole career, is Inglewood Connect. And I heard on my tour that there is a project from your artists in your lobby that actually has given an interpretation of this community as well. But Inglewood, it is a rich community. They have very, very deep roots, high spirits. It is a historically Black community, but they are under-resourced and they have been disinvested for years and years and years. And so that truly impacts whether or not communities can have spaces like this. And so with my role in facilitating discussions with them, going out and picking up a marker and drawing what we're all thinking, we were able to come up with this vision for this community. And it is a mixed use with lots of spaces. And you can see it's very open for the community. There's a college nearby, Kennedy King College. They have a hand in this space as well, but it's really meant to be sort of this incubation space. And then the image is not here, but there's a landmark that exists on this site as well that we are revigorating and bringing back to life and giving it a new life. So the firehouse is actually going to become a culinary center. So then things changed. This is 2020. George Floyd was murdered, and we all, as a world, as a country, as an industry, we had to take a moment. We had to step back. And we'll take a moment today as well, because these are all of the names, not all, but countless names of Blacks who have lost their lives to police brutality. Thank you, everyone. So why is that pause so important? Why is it so important that I step into spaces and work specifically with Black communities as a Black woman? Because these are some of the barriers that we have stacked against us. That elementary school I mentioned earlier, it's closed. That's due to disinvestment. That's due to redlining and segregation and us not being starved in our communities. And so it is absolutely pivotal for me and for all of us, quite frankly, in this room to step into these spaces and have this impact. So again, we rolled up our sleeves and we started doing, and this happened across the country in all cities. But what we did see on the project side was our clients responded. And they said, look, we want diversity on our teams. We want the important things to happen in addition to the design. We want the communities to inform the designs. We gotta get this right. And so we responded. We responded. This is a very, very proud illustration and project that we went after, C40, where we were creating an incubation in the middle of downtown. Actually, the coordinates are 00 on Chicago's map. And we sought out artists, we sought out different communities of focus. We did 10 different communities. We sought out the Chicago public transit system. We sought out all of the partners nearby that would be able to, like the law school, that would be able to lend resources to the space. And we also went into the communities to understand how to bring sustainability into those spaces as well as into central downtown. We didn't get this project. I'm still a little salty about that. But it still marks a proud moment for us in responding to today's needs of responding to biodiversity, responding to sustainability, responding to racism and segregation and all of the above, and bringing that into projects and understanding how we can bring solutions. So another project or focus, and guys, we have a new mayor in Chicago, so this system does not exist anymore, or it's currently going away, which I'm a little sad about because I do feel this was one of the successes out of the last administration. Invest Southwest was a platform that was created by Mayor Lightfoot that focused on 10 different neighborhoods like North Lawndale, and brought in resources like the SOMs and the Genslers of the world to come in and really work with these communities. Now notice I didn't say come in and design for the communities or come in and do your magic. No, you need to come. We came in and we listened and we co-created and we co-designed, and some amazing projects came out of this as well. And so all of that to say, for me, it all starts with passion. And I encourage that for all of you as you continue in both your school career and transitioning into the professional world. And so what does that look like? First of all, you can't do anything alone. That's what I've learned as a professional. That's what I've learned in being impactful in spaces. I am one person. I cannot do it all alone. And so it's been about understanding allyship and then strengthening that allyship. And so what does that look like for me? It looks like, Sorry about that. It looks like providing access. This is SOM, and this is our old office. I encourage you, if you're ever in Chicago, please reach out to me. I'll give you guys a tour. Our office has been updated since this. It opened during the day after shutdown for the pandemic. So none of us got to see the new office until we came back last year. But providing access. As I mentioned, if you guys come to Chicago, we will see the space. That was something that wasn't necessarily a thing before at SOM. I think it was a mystery for a lot of folks that come from university, come from the community, and now it's more of an open door policy. If you know someone and you want a tour, you can have that access now. It also looks like utilizing SOM's resources to feed the organizations that are doing the work. Anyone participated in the student design competition for National Melma? Yes?
Yeah, we had a course 2 years ago.
Yes.
Where we worked towards submitting.
Beautiful. Did you guys play?
We did not.
Okay, that's okay. That's okay. I encourage you to keep doing it. Keep doing it. I've actually started. So SOM has sponsored the student design competition for 5 years running now, and it's because little old me walked in and said, "This is important, and we have to do this. We have to invest in our students." And so they said, "Heck yes, Tiara, we'll do it." And this has been 5 years now. I've also served, and every year we've had representation for judges. We serve as mentors to teams and everything in between to provide access and resources for this specific competition. Within SOM, we formally established groups that are designated and dedicated to, this is some of the underrepresented groups within our firm. And that plus is there because it keeps growing. We've created this kind of open space culture where we want to encourage more of these groups to pop up. Parents, I'm forcing parents to create a group in the future, also pet parents to create a group in the future. So this is really important. These groups have advocacy and access to our leadership and impact the firm's culture in that way. And that's important. When you pick firms that you work for, make sure you are drilling them at the interview process as well as them drilling you. It's so important. I think that's my approach when I'm going into firms, when we're going into projects. Any sort of, you want to make sure the relationship is symbiotic and going both ways. So also for me, another big pillar is cultivating leadership. What does that look like? And I say be visible. It does mean rolling your sleeves up. It does mean being in the places, people seeing your face. And it also means giving back. For me, that's youth development. I cannot tell you how many times I've been on a Zoom call with a student late at night reviewing their packages and making sure they're prepared for interviews, connecting them with friends of mine's firms for internships. Do you guys know Udo, by the way? Yes. Udo is a personal mentee of mine, and she's a great example. She got placed into a friend's firm of mine. She's interned there for 2 years, and now she's going to grad school at IIT to do her master's. So, and I don't know how many letters of recommendation I wrote for Udo. Always here, always a resource for her, and she's thriving. So again, providing that, and that's Udo, by the way, in the photo. Super excited about that. So providing resources to our youth. You guys are our future. That is so important for me. Also, the network. I mentioned this building allyship earlier. The networks that you plug yourself into is so important. How many of you are a part of AIAS? be proud. AIS, hands up. Okay, we have a few. No mouse? Okay. Is there any other student groups?
Women in architecture.
Women in architecture? Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Women in architecture, I like that. Okay, so I'm asking that because similarly, we have the same organizations professionally, and it's important to dive into that and do the work. These organizations not only impact our industry, but they also impact our built environment. And so I'm plugged into a few here, but this is what it looks like. It looks like rolling your sleeves up. It looks like showing up. It looks like being in spaces like this to, share and cross-pollinate ideas. And it also looks like teaching, giving back. This is a studio that I taught at for a couple of years at IIT. Graduate level design studio. Now this was very unique because it was not your typical architecture studio. This one, they're graduate students, so we said they know how to draw, we're not focused on that. We're gonna focus on how they are attacking and approaching real problems in communities that need it. This is Inglewood, by the way, that we're standing. This is our project focus, our community for the semester. We gave them a community, and we said, do the research, and we're also going to provide you the agency, provide you the access to those community members. Based on meeting them and understanding the community and your research of the community, we want you to come up with the prompts, and we want you to propose the site. And so based on that, these groups were able to really get into the purposes of what the community's needs were and address and design accordingly. So that was a little bit different for us. IT loved the concept because they brought us back a couple of times. But that's where the world is evolving now. Again, this, I think for our students, it was a moment for them to really see how we practice in real life. In the academic setting. And this is big for IIT because IIT's campus is located in an area that truly has a lot of opportunity for the students to connect with communities around it that they can be extremely impactful in. But there's been a little bit of a disconnect with that over the years. And so we were totally breaking down those barriers and providing an agency for students with communities. And then civic leadership. So Joseph mentioned that I am on the Landmarks Commission. There's 9 of us that serve on this board, and ultimately we are deciding what becomes the built legacy of Chicago. No pressure, right? No pressure at all. But it really means me questioning a lot of the professionals that come into the space about why this should be a built legacy. But more importantly, me questioning why neighborhoods like Inglewood and Woodlawn, is my community personally, why we don't have more landmarks. If you look at the map, it is extremely polarizing of where the landmarks exist in Chicago, and as a commission, we are actively working to change that. And I think it's because my loud mouth is decided to put me on the commission. But nonetheless, I think I'm learning in these spaces that it's not necessarily folks don't want to do the work, it's that you need the loud mouth, like me in the room, to point to the problem, and then we all can address it. So. Which is nice, because I'm not fighting against the grain. I'm just kind of creating a path for all of us to work toward that's equitable for everyone. So own your leadership has been sort of this new era for me. First 500 is my leadership. And I've already mentioned to you guys throughout the talk that my personal experiences, lived experiences, is ultimately why First 500 came about. When I moved to Chicago in 2015, I could not find Black women architects. And that was scary. And I said, is there not like a central place that I could look and find them? Like, where does it exist? And they said, well, there's one here. Hi, Black woman architect, nice to meet you. Where's the rest of you? Well, there's one here. Oh, okay, great, nice to meet you. Also, Noah. And I was like, oh no. My experience was the impetus of First 500. And in addition to meeting those kind of one-offs, I was also doing the research to understand that Black women make up less than 1% of our industry. I'll say that again. Black women make up less than 1% of our industry. So when I was in school and I had never met a Black woman architect, it's probably because none of them exist where my school was located in Springfield, Missouri. So that statistic alone was like, I have to do something. I absolutely have to do something. And this is something I'm passionate about because we, Black women, are about 7% of our population. So how is our industry not reflecting that? So, First 500, our mission is really about amplifying the voices and the presence of Black women in our field. Additionally, we are looking to inspire the Arianas of the world to make sure that she understands that she has a place in this industry. And the Udos of the world that's killing it now, making sure that they understand there's a place here for them and there's resources, and we will bend over backwards to make sure that they remain. And so we have 3 pillars, and ultimately when I created First 500 in 2018, raising awareness was what we were all about. I traveled all over the country to say, look, pay attention guys, we have to do something, this is important. But ultimately, we wanted to evolve and make sure that, again, the young Black girls and women have the resources that they need. And so resourcing her roadmap became important for us. I mentioned that I never read about a Black architect, right? On our website, there is resources listed chronologically, so like YouTube videos for babies, all the way up through licensed architects where they have networks they can connect into. And then there's a list of books, 50 plus books that are either Black architect authored or feature Black architects' work. And so I encourage us, while we're in study right now, we're in academia, to utilize that list if you want to diversify the architecture that you're learning about. And then building a strong community. So on our website, you could find the faces of these Black women and their stories and their backgrounds. And what's interesting about that is, the AINs of the world, the NOMAs of the world, when we read about ourselves there, it's very professional, this is the type of practice I do, this is how many years of experience I have, this is where I'm licensed. Well, there, we're telling the stories through their lens and what's important to them. So some Black women architects may say, being a mom is the most important thing to me. Some may say, I love construction administration. You really get to read about their lived experiences through their lens. And so we're really proud of that and pride ourselves on that. And people say, why, Tiara? Why is it important? Why are we numbers so low? This is why. For those of you who are not familiar, hopefully all of you have or are working toward having an AXP account, which will start your experience documentation. And then you have to take these 6 exams to become a licensed architect. And the highlighted portions in each represent the Black populace. And this is important because you can see that this group has the lowest pass rates consistently on every exam. So we, as an industry, have to do better. We have to elevate the ones that are there, we have to provide resources, and we have to build up this community. And so, this is where we are. Oh, there's lack of access, we need more mentors, oh, maybe some funding, there's disparities. This is where I want us to get to. These are the lived experiences of Black women in our industry. And I can attest to this as a Black woman in our industry. This is where we have to get to. We have to really start addressing the real roots of the issues that exist right now. And so, this is a funny story, I'll be quick here. But I actually challenged NCAR in 2021 to alleviate the testing fees of Black test takers. Because Blacks make up less than 5% of the industry, so it's a drop in the bucket. And this went viral, by the way. And NCAR responded, and they said, oh, we'll provide, we actually earned the works of providing a free practice exam for everyone, which did not address this. So we may have to do another round of this to apply some more pressure, but this was received overwhelmingly positive in the Black community. And folks said, I would come out of my testing hiatus to finish my exams if this happened. Because it's a lot. It's a lot to go through the process, set aside the time. You may be at different points in your life, with your family life, your work life. This is a lot. So alleviating that barrier of the fee, I thought would be an excellent idea, at least through 2030, to get us to the 2030 challenge of having 5,000 licensed Black architects in our country. We're nowhere close to that goal. And this was definitely kind of swept away as quickly as possible by the powers of our industry. But I utilized my voice, and that was important. And again, this really service. So, for those of you who are interested in supporting, First 500 exists on all social media platforms, whatever is your interest. I encourage you guys to come and check us out and follow us, and to tell us stories about how you guys have provided agency to your Black women fellow classmates, or to your Black women faculty, or to Black communities that you work with. We love hearing those stories, and we're actually queuing up for a story series now on that. So, thought leadership. Now we're transitioning into how do you use your voice in this space? Like how am I providing thoughts on different issues that pertain to amplifying the Black community, for instance, amplifying the fact that we need to do more about Black women architects. So this was an issue that was published in AIA Chicago, where I deeply discussed how we need to be more equitable as an industry as we responded to George Floyd's murder, and things that people could do to change that scenario. So internally reflect was one of them. Also revisiting our policies was another one. And that was received well. Again, these were sort of our takeaways from that one. Another one, oh, by the way, this shoot, sorry if you go back one. This shoot was, I essentially went around to Black created spaces in Chicago, whether it was art, or if it was architecture, or school closures in Black communities. And I did this photo shoot to, again, raise awareness and really keep us conscious as an industry about having to do more and pay more attention to these spaces. I think we all love and enjoy the museums and the curated spaces and having the influence in the high profile spaces, but these spaces are just as important. I you can see the rubbish on the ground. These are just as important as the museums and the downtown centers of our cities. And so the Tribune was the latest of me providing some feedback. And this one upset a lot of people's lives because I essentially, the AI, I call it the fall of artificial impact, which is what we've done as a people since George Floyd's murder. We said, we stand in solidarity, we're going to do all these things, but here we are 3 years later and we still haven't quite moved the needle as far as we can. And so this really reflects on that and gives some feedback as well. Now, leading the dialogue, I want to talk about that a little bit too. Sorry, I need to click now. This involves showing up in spaces and sharing your voice. So for me, whether it's women's rights, whether it's discussing burnout, whether it's discussing our built environment, this is what this looks like. And I'm sure in this image you can see I am the only woman on stage. I am the only person. I mean, this was very telling because I'm in a lot of spaces like this, but someone in the audience said, "Is this normal?" And I said, "It is. And it shouldn't be, and we have to change that." So all of the women in the room are student women. I really, really encourage you to find your passion and your voice and utilize that and step into these spaces. And don't be afraid because you're surrounded by men. Your voice and your perspective matters. And so again, and I keep saying, I'm sure you're seeing passion as a theme here, but it's very, very important to be sort of your guiding compass. Promoting civic action. I mentioned the Landmarks Commission earlier, and this is sort of what the breakdown is. And I highlighted some of our names because this was an important fact for me in understanding why there's been such a discrepancy in the past. If you look here, you can see over half of us who are highlighted in blue, we come from backgrounds of the built environment. So whether we're architects or urban designers, this was important. Historically, this has not been the case. There's been lawyers, there's been, journalists, there's been folks of different backgrounds, doctors that are not connected to the built environment, yet they're influencing the built environment. And so this was really important for us to see that our city is becoming more conscious of how the built environment is being impacted and who's impacting it. These are this is the criteria for determining what becomes a landmark. And I think the unique historical events and also culture has really been popping up more as a theme rather than the architect who's designed it and it being in an affluent community that has significance. So that has also been a shift that I'm seeing. And then I want to leave us with this because this is my absolute favorite. This is my favorite. So, how many of you are familiar with Emmett Till? Thank you, Lord. So Emmett Till, I won't even go into the story because I can't say the story without tears, but this is Emmett Till's childhood home from Chicago. And it is now a landmark, and it belongs to the community of Woodlawn. This is right around the corner from my house. And you can see that this is a typical 2-flat in Chicago. There's no historical architectural significance here, but Emmett Till was the face that launched the civil rights in our country. So it is important. This is important to not only the people in Woodlawn, but our country, our nation. And so when this property came up, it actually was coming up for alterations and demolition from an owner, a developer who never stepped foot in a house, didn't know the neighborhood. And I was the person on the call that said, this doesn't belong to you. You need to gift it or sell it back to the community. And He didn't. Once I said that, there was a ripple effect. Everyone on the call, the aldermen of the area, the other leaders, the advocacy groups, they all stepped up and said the same thing, and that pressure allowed this property to go back to where it belonged, which is the community of Woodlawn. So that is my most proud moment of serving as an advocate in our space and our built environment. And as I mentioned before, it starts with passion, it also ends with passion. Everything I do, all of the spaces I've created is because if there is no well to dig from, to drink from, dig until you create one. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Oh, thank you. Green is live, so just press the button when you're ready.
Hi everybody, I'm Ariana, as was introduced earlier today. And I just want to thank Tiara for coming here and speaking with us today. I was really inspired. I always get inspired when I get to see somebody in the same field as I and looks like me. So I think we're opening it up to questions now, but I have a couple questions while I have the microphone. I certainly will get back to them tomorrow if you guys come to our breakfast with Tiara in room 104, our second building. But right now, I wanted to ask you to expand on your decision to work on design like at the urban city scale and how that afforded you to cater to Black and brown communities better than what you were doing before you decided to do that.
Yes, that's a great question. I think as I was getting into practice and learning more through practice about architecture, it really was about the bigger vision and being able to work directly with our communities to create that vision. I think before, when I connected with communities, it was mostly about, okay, you've given us the program, this is what the zoning allows, this is the design that we're presenting, these are the options. Now it's, what do we want the space, what do we want your community to feel like? What's important to your culture? You know, what are your traditions? Like, those are the conversations that I was more interested in having to set the stage, to set the vision, rather than talking through the detail of design.
Okay. I specifically asked that question because I'm also into more urban design. I'm minoring in planning, so I want you to expand on that.
Another sounds like she's gonna come to Chicago and visit me.
I also want to know how your identity as a Black woman shows up in your design work. If there's anything physical that like translates from your identity in your buildings or any urban design you've done.
Yes, I think for me, she's asking how does my identity show up. I think it's intangible because it's really about making sure the people feel good about the spaces that we're creating and the visions that we're bringing to life. And it's tough sometimes. I have a project specifically in Nashville where we had a developer who had their specific vision. The project was in a historically Black community, and I was the person in the middle, like trying to bring the community's vision and the developer's vision together. And every moment, every step of the way, that community was locked in with me. You know, I made sure I was completely transparent with them. I made sure they understood if they had to compromise on certain things, why that was. And then likewise with the developer. And so I think for me, it's remaining true to who I am in any space I step into. And that is as a Black woman, that is as my identity, and making sure that people understand that, whether it's the multi-billionaire developer or the community.
Thank you. I guess what I'm more than this, but to save time. What would you say? I mean, you're a professional advocate, and what would you say would be like the role of the students here in advocacy for the topics that you outlined today? And even more so, the students who are not people of color. I think that's something that's kind of sensitive, and to know what your thoughts are around that.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think students, I wish that I had the vision and the bandwidth that you guys have for solving everyday problems. My students in that image that I showed you were so eager to jump in and work with those communities. I wasn't afforded that opportunity as a student, but look, I think our future is bright when it comes to students. I think you guys have that tenacity to challenge us on the things that we're doing wrong, whether it's in the classroom or the environment. I think you guys should, if you see something, speak up. And then as far as the majority goes, we talked about moments already. I hope to see some of you tomorrow at breakfast. But also I would say supporting those groups, supporting NOMAS, supporting the Black women students around you, Black men as well. They're only about 1.5% in the industry, 2% in the industry. So supporting. What does support look like? Because people are like, I do support them. I think I love their work. Ask. You can go up to Benny and say, hi, Benny. I understand that you're working on this model. Do you need anything? Benny might say, you know what? A glass of water would be nice. That's something simple, right? But he also may say, which was me in college, actually, I don't have any materials. Do you have some scraps? Can you put those aside for me when you're finished? And that would look like support. I was a student that was digging in the trash can, grabbing everyone's scraps to build my model. My model was built after everyone else's because I had to use everyone's scraps to build it. So again, just ask. Like if you go up to one of your fellow classmates, I'm sure they will have an answer for you on how to support them. And the minorities in the room, think about how your classmates can support you. Think about it and have an answer for them when they approach you.
That's great. I'm going to stop with my questions, but if there are any questions in the audience, go ahead and ask you. Yes. Anything all the way back?
Have you considered taking your advocacy into the area of zoning in order to remove the limitations created by regulations and other sorts of things that limit the ability of disadvantaged communities and families to become prosperous? Things like removing the limitations that prevent live-work sorts of residential spaces, other sorts of things like that directly impact disadvantaged communities.
Yes, I think I can only serve on one commission at a time. But your point is well taken about the live work, and if there is a petition, or I do recommend a petition first of all, but if there is one, I would be more than happy to support it. And also our zoning group for Chicago, I'm not sure if that's their focus. Have you went to them at all?
I don't live in Chicago,
Okay.
so that's not, but I just noticed across the country,
Yes.
live workspaces are considered to be sort of cutting edge and something that really takes effort to get through regulatory bodies in order to be able to design for that.
I think it's an important issue, and we should absolutely provide. I don't know if there's a case study for when it's been implemented correctly, but something like that can help be to take something like that seriously. If I'm on the other side, I don't sit on the zoning board for Chicago, but if I'm on the other side, that would be my approach, is presenting a case where it could be successful, or proposing that we implement it into a small area and see the successes and study it before being employed at a larger scale. I think the challenge with it, if I'm speaking from the other side now, I think the challenge of it would be, does this take away from our downtown centers? Does this take away from people that have the bigger shops? Not the Walmarts, but I'm saying like actual physical bigger mom and pop shops in the communities. You know, if I had a haircut barbershop on the first floor of my home, for instance, would it take away from the actual brick and mortar at the corridor? So I think if we study it at a smaller scale, then maybe employ it if it's successful, understand the down. I think that would be an approach I would take. Is that helpful? I do support what you're saying, though. I just think studying it would be the first approach. Yes?
Hi, so I have more of a question regarding, like, it's kind of more opinion-based, but the ideas of, like, building purpose and things like that. What do you think would be the most impactful building purpose in underprivileged communities? Like, would it be commercial buildings, residential buildings, more industrial spaces? Which one do you think would be the most impactful to those underprivileged communities?
You're saying to bring in, to introduce? We need it all. I don't think there is a proper typology to bring into the spaces. I think, and it's not the same for every community. We mentioned Inglewood. Inglewood has, I don't know how many school closures, so schools would be really perfect to introduce there. Inglewood also has a closed down train system, introducing a train system, reopening would be appropriate there. My community, Woodlawn, we have like empty corridors that could use more commercial. So it looks different for every community, but the answer is all of them.
I was just going to say that I grew up out in the southwest side of Chicago, so I've gone through all of these communities, whether it was one of the things that actually led me to going into all of these communities when I was a child was the Park District, because with the entire city of Chicago being, you know, one unit, they kind of had everyone spread out to go to every park district they could, and that way kids got to experience, kids from the north side got to experience what Southside neighborhoods felt like. And that was just through public services. So then, and then as I grew up and as some of these communities got more investment into them, then I saw where does that investment, like where is that investment needed the most? Is it needed in more residences on these empty corners, or is it more smaller commercial spaces like you were talking about on the corners to kind of bring in revenue, and then the revenue kind of leads to more expansion? Or is it like office and workspaces? I'm not even thinking about commercial, but just like people in these places have high unemployment rates. How about we start bringing jobs to them by building offices, not necessarily factories, but like corporate offices, or just any type of office space to make them more accessible, and that just overall benefits the community and the communities around it. So that's why I was kind of interested in the question.
I love your training thinking, and I think you belong in urban design.
I am minor in urban design, so that fits kind of.
Yes.
But thank you.
I live in the Rest Belt community that is about 45 miles from here, Decatur, Illinois.
Another area.
And if you're from Greenwood, Decatur, crossing the lake from South Shores, going into the heart of the city, there's an area that has just really been hit with blight. Most of the homes have been torn down. It's an underprivileged area. And in research that I did last semester, 60% of the people there are below the poverty line. And as the homes have been torn down, different opportunists have gone in after the city paid for those houses to be torn down and grabbed a hold of the lots. And when I look at the different names, I'm familiar with the people that have these lots. They're looking for an opportunity down the line. I would really like to see that community return to people that originally were there and have it mixed use. It is a for the most part, 5 minutes, sometimes 7.5 minute walking portion of town. That at one time had some retail, a little bit of commercial, but it could be just an absolutely wonderful neighborhood and a welcoming into the community. With that background, my question is, how do you get in and take these properties back from the opportunists and create an organization whose goal is to bring that portion of the community back up a little bit?
Could you repeat the question?
Yes, I can. I think his question is about, he's witnessing a disinvested community of, it sounds like a marginalized population, become more disinvested over time. And the properties are being bought up by affluent developers, it sounds like. And he's asking, how do we flip that, or how do we reverse that? And I have two examples in mind. The first is the Invest Southwest platform that I mentioned before, where essentially the city purposefully created a platform that took its resources and filtered it into communities like this one. So typically in the urban world, there's studies done to determine whether or not those communities get resources, whether it's for the transportation system or for commercial space. And typically the catchment area that's studied, if it doesn't fit the criteria, it doesn't get any investment. And so the last administration understood that, and they said, no, we're going to flip that on its head, and we're just going to focus on these 10 neighborhoods, regardless of their makeup, and we're going to provide and flush resources into those communities. That's an example. It would really involve us going away from the traditional way of development and resourcing our communities. The second example I'm thinking of is in Minneapolis. They came up with an anti-gentrification policy.
So I know in 2020, there's a lot of defacing and vandalism towards like statues of people like Christopher Columbus and George Washington. And with your position on like the board of landmarks, can you talk about the importance of removing statues such as those? And can you talk about like if you guys have discussed that on the board of landmarks?
Yes. I think nationally speaking, that was a big discussion, and it was approved to remove a lot of those statues. Mostly because of the policies and practices that those individuals felt and believed in. We personally on the Landmarks Commission did not come across the statue removals in Chicago, but we definitely had our share of kind of racial divides in different communities and understanding preservation wise what that looks like. I can give an example. Pilsen is a historically Latino community today in Chicago, and I mean, beautiful, rich architecture, culture, murals, things of that sort. And there was a move to create that as a historic district, but there was a disconnect on what that meant to the local residents. People assumed the property values would hike up and they wouldn't be able to maintain their properties and they would get pushed out. Versus the other side of people feeling we need to save what's there, we absolutely need this to become a historic district to preserve all of the culture that exists. So the two butted heads and ultimately the community one, and it's not a historic district right now. But that was racially driven because the Latino population was not fully versed on what a historic district fully means. And we failed as a commission, as a city at communicating that, and ultimately no one will, because it's not a historic district today.
Thank you, everyone, for asking these amazing questions. Thank you so much to Tiara and Ariana for leading this discussion and for joining us tonight.